It's the 10th of the 4th, 24, and today in F1 news, Andretti are making serious steps towards their ultimate F1 goals. Indeed, Andretti Global has announced that it's opened a new facility in none other than Silverstone. Andretti say that they have embarked upon the next stage of their preparation for Formula 1 with the opening of a new facility at Silverstone, read Andretti's statement. Joined by Andretti Cadillac UK, an existing workforce of approximately 80 people. We had the honour today of inaugurating this facility, the British home of our extended Andretti Global family. Don't know how to sound good that. But why does this even matter? Well, because in 2024, sadly, F1 is still a very European-centric sport. The bulk of the Grand Prix happen there and the bulk of the talent live there. And since synergy and sustainability need to be front and centre of any F1 operation, this is huge. Lest we forget that some say that Michael Andretti's career fell foul of the fact that he continued to base himself out of North America. Notwithstanding the erstwhile F1 circumstance was more European centric than ever. How could Michael Andretti have ever succeeded? Based out of North America, Michael's career was doomed before it even took off. Techie that. Lest we forget that Andretti and the legends that are Lucky Sons had their applications for F1 entry rejected only last year. The case against said F1 is that from this symbiotic relationship, Andretti would experience more upside than F1 would. And in response to that, some may say, Andretti have announced plans to broaden their motorsport footprint. Now they plan to enter F2 and F3 with a view to promote US talent to their F1 team. Motorsport.com reports that Andretti are already moving into their Silverstone facility. On the assumption then that the F1 entry ultimately gets the green light, this will be their facility, their home base even, for their F2 and F3 programs. The building of which Andretti Global speak is a 48,000 square footer. Sounds like they mean business. And the timing of this for Andretti couldn't be any better, because Alpine's disappointing start to the F1 2024 season has fueled rumours that they might be interested in a sale. Unless we forget that on the back of key personnel leaving, not least of whom Otmar Safnauer, Alpine's 4-year medium-term plan is in tatters. They are nowhere near a race victory. And so it comes as no surprise that Renault are now more keen than ever to do a deal. That deal, however, would be contingent on the new owner continuing to use Renault engines. Good luck with that. Oh, and by the way, Renault alongside Williams and Sauber are the only teams still to have 0 points in the 24 season. And in other news, the wholesale overhaul of the regulations in 26, that's taken a massive hit. After teams testing the new car in the simulator were alarmed with their findings. The rules in 26 are set to debut a 50-50 split between ICE and battery and movable aero. The idea being that wings will be able to run in a high downforce configuration into corners, low drag in the straights. According to sources, however, notwithstanding its theoretical promise, in practice in the sim, the thing was undrivable. Drivers were spinning out on the straights under acceleration and couldn't even take the smallest bit of curve without the same outcome. Can you say Mercedes W15? Speaking of which, Wolff, the team principal from the Brackley and Brixton outfit, is back in the news again. Of course he is. Wolff was saying that the reason that the Mercedes pairing pulled the switcheroo during the Japanese Grand Prix was that Lewis was testing. His car was slower then. Toto continued that it was Lewis's suggestion. He was being more than fair, a proper team player. Lewis Hamilton evangelist will not like that. Oh, the humanity. And when asked whether Mercedes are better placed now to focus on their 26 car as opposed to continuing to develop their 24 one, Toto had this to say: "We are Mercedes. We cannot completely abandon the 24 car and continue to perform at this level. That's not the ambition of the brand, nor is it the ambition of our partners. So no, I think you've got to continue to push, continue to form your understanding." But eventually, Wolff continued, when the FIA come up with a new form of regulation, we, like all other teams, will start to look at it, and probably on the earlier side. And on Mercedes' material underperformance, Wolff had this to say: "If your expectation is to eventually race for wins and championships, then you can say we're in an effective no man's land, because Max and Red Bull are just that far ahead. But this is the reality that we're facing at the moment, and we're trying to do our best out of this new reality." But for the avoidance of doubt, what does that look like season to date? Well, a best race finishing position of 5th, a best qualifying position of 3rd. Oh, the humanity. You can't help but think that Lewis at this stage will already have one eye on the future. For Hamilton, pastures anew has a name, and that name is Scuderia Ferrari. Speaking of which, Ferrari are buoyed by their performance at the Japanese Grand Prix, saying that now they've developed a chassis that doesn't shred tyres and is adjustable, malleable even. Suzuka, they say, confirms its ability to compete regardless of track type. That notwithstanding, Ferrari realised that the delta between them and Red Bull is still material, partially driven by the upgrade that the Bulls that are Red brought to Australia. But in lap time terms, aero efficiency was only part of the whole explain. The other portion, of course, being pit stops. At the Japanese Grand Prix, Red Bull averaged 2.1, Ferrari, in stark contrast, 2.4. And over at McLaren, despite their best start to a championship for years, they too are keen to expedite their learning curve. Their first material upgrade package is set to arrive in Miami. From the Japanese Grand Prix, McLaren's takeaway was one of understanding. The magnitude of the delta between them and Red Bull will take more than just one upgrade to fix for. Though season to date, McLaren are in a completely different stratosphere to competitors Aston Martin and Mercedes, having scored double their points hitherto. McLaren in the constructors are on 69 points, Mercedes and Aston Martin on 34 and 33 respectively. In constructors points, McLaren have 69, Aston and Mercedes 33 and 34, and in the daily helmet market, all eyes are on Carlos Sainz Jr., although he says he's prepared to be patient to make sure the next move is the right one. Audi, in stark contrast, would like to hear from Carlos Sainz sooner rather than later. In driver silly season, there are bottlenecks then: Sainz, Verstappen, Fernando Alonso. And Marco believes that Aston Martin are putting pressure in different directions. But Marco continues, we don't play these games. We won't hear from Red Bull around personnel changes until at least the middle of the season. And as far as the Mexican Minister of Defense is concerned, this will be music to his ears, especially if his rich vein of form continues, lest we forget that in Suzuka, Checo was a final turn away from beating Max to the pole. And to further underline the Mexican's outperformance hitherto, the only driver not to have been overtaken this year has a name, and his name is Checo Perez. No further questions, Your Honour.